Thank you. Manager, you want to take us through the American Rescue Plan briefing?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As we pivot to this next briefing, which is also a very substantive one, this is a reflection that since late March of 2020, we did have staff from across multiple city departments, namely through our economic development department, that focused on economic recovery. And initially, that work was reactive, given the sudden onset of the pandemic. But since then, through the leadership of our Chief Economic Recovery Officer, Veronica Briceño, city staff have now focused on a more proactive economic recovery framework, one that would be ready to go in the event of a second round of federal stimulus funding. Before we get to the presentation on the recommended spending plan for the American Rescue Plan, Director Briceño will present the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Framework, which promotes a more equitable, competitive, and resilient Austin economy. I'll now turn it over to Director Briceño.
Thank you, Spencer. And if we can pull up the first presentation, that would be great. And while they're pulling that up, I'm going to give an overview and then turn it over to David Gray to talk about the opportunities that were identified in this plan. But before I do, if I could emphasize something that our city manager said, this is the work of many, many staff in our city. Certainly the whole economic development department was a part of this, but more than that, staff from just about every department, I believe, in our city had a role in this. So kudos to our city employees for their hard work, putting together something that none of us have ever done before, while dealing personally with a pandemic as well. So I really appreciate the talent that we have in our city. Next slide, please. So a little bit of our history and background. As y'all recall, a year ago, our mayor declared a state of emergency due to COVID-19 on March 6th. On March 22nd, our city manager established our economic recovery strike team to respond to this pandemic. The strike team has done numerous things, including launching economic relief programs and services to support individuals, creatives, businesses, and nonprofits, convening stakeholders to identify immediate needs and recovery opportunities, provide city council members with regular updates on economic response and recovery efforts, discuss economic response and recovery efforts with multiple departments, and identify opportunities for economic recovery and resiliency informed by a robust qualitative and quantitative data and metrics. Next slide. So the deliverables that were provided by this team: we launched 12 financial assistance programs since March of 2020. We distributed more than $115 million to support us.
We lost you. I think you went to mute.
I think your pet muted your microphone.
Yes, my coworker muted me. That was not very nice. We distributed more than $115 million to support Austin families, nonprofits, and businesses. We created a one-stop shop at www.atxrecovers.com to serve as a hub of resources. We developed new supportive services. Sorry, I have a cat that really doesn't want me to present to you. My apologies. So we developed new supportive resource services, including mental health hotlines, business coaching, etc. And we facilitated more than 125 unique stakeholder engagements and administered 3 surveys. Next slide. So I won't go into detail on each of these bullets, but this summarizes the extensive stakeholder research and engagement we performed over the past year, including yourself as council members, our city department directors, working with our local chambers of commerce, administering surveys, and working with numerous business and industry focus groups. In addition to this, our staff heard quite a bit of one-on-one feedback from affected parties. Next slide. And with that, I will turn it over to David Gray, our communications manager in EDD, who will go over the identified opportunities and who does not have a pet distracting his presentation.
Thank you, Director Briceño, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to present to you the 45 opportunities that were identified as part of our Economic Recovery and Resiliency Framework And again, these 45 opportunities were identified after more than 125 stakeholder engagement sessions that we held over the course of the last year, as well as data and information that we've gathered either from our economic experts, like the John Haquinhoses of the world, and through data that we collected through the various programs that we administered over the last year. The 45 opportunities, each one of those opportunities aligns with one of the strategic outcome areas from Strategic Direction 2023. And so you can see the number of opportunities that align with each SD23 outcome area on your screen. If we go to the next slide, this next slide will show you how we think about the opportunities in terms of themes. And so for kind of ease of understanding, we've took the 45 opportunities and we packaged them into one of these 7 themes: civic innovation, community enhancement, employee and business assistance, financial support, government service procurement, health and mental wellness, and public infrastructure. If you go to the next slide will show you feasibility icons. These feasibility icons are assigned to each of the opportunities in the framework. The green icon indicates an opportunity that staff believes will require more federal stimulus or dedicated funding. The yellow icon represents opportunities that require a city programmatic or policy change. And the blue icon is an icon that represents opportunities that need additional third-party partnerships. I do just want to pause and quickly say that in a few minutes, you are going to receive our recommended spending framework. Each of the items in the economic recovery section of that spending framework corresponds to an item in this presentation with a green feasibility icon indicator. I also will move through these 45 opportunities relatively quickly in the interest of time. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those at the end. We go to the next slide. The next slide will start with our civic innovation opportunities. And again, these are opportunities that were informed by those stakeholder engagement sessions. The first one on this list is to continue developing partnerships that allow us to secure enhanced COVID-19 testing and tracking resources, as well as supporting the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine to our historically marginalized groups. The second opportunity centers around establishing formal pathways for City of Austin staff to receive and review innovative ideas from our community. And the last is to facilitate the creation of financial services for unbanked Austinites, particularly those living in communities that don't have access to financially serving resources, or maybe have an overabundance of payday and predatory lenders in their zip codes. The next slide continues with additional civic innovation opportunities, including taking steps to formalize our resiliency efforts so that we're better prepared for future disasters. Unfortunately, COVID and even the winter storm are not the last disasters that we're going to face, and so we want to formalize our resiliency efforts. The next one on this list is launching community challenges. These are spaces that engage our residents and our creative community in a process of co-creating solutions for local problems, and then finding ways to implement those co-created solutions. And then the last one that's part of this list is to support research to reduce the risk of infection at large and live events. The next slide begins the opportunities that we identified under the communication enhancement bucket. These include announcing grants from a centralized city source. We've currently been doing this through atxrecovers.com as our one-stop hub, and we do plan to continue doing that as long as COVID remains in our community. The second is continue to create educational resources that help our businesses reopen and reopen safely, keeping employees and customers in our community safe. And then the last one on this slide is to create a communications tree that would allow us to more quickly disseminate important updates regarding COVID-19 or other emergencies to our community. The next slide continues with our communication enhancement opportunities. This one includes an additional communications tree specifically for our local small businesses. This would be a tree that would give them opportunities to receive information about permitted festivals and events that those small businesses might be able to access for revenue opportunities. The next one on this list is to continue with launching programs and promoting workforce development opportunities, specifically workforce development opportunities aligned with currently available jobs and living wage paying jobs also. And then the last one on this list is standardize our messaging to stakeholders and our business patrons, which is something that we have been doing in collaboration with the Emergency Operations Center and APH staff, Homeland Security staff, and other city departments. And so we want to continue making sure that our messaging is not only standardized, but also available in numerous languages. The next slide begins with the employee and business assistance opportunities. Opportunities that were identified in this category include continuing to assist our local creatives with streaming content from local arts and cultural organizations. And there are currently efforts underway to create more opportunities for our local creatives to stream their content. Another opportunity in this category is to continue with our collaborations with partners on workforce development to prepare Austinites for jobs in current industries, but also jobs in newly emerging industries, making sure that people are set up for workforce opportunities and employment opportunities to come. And then the last one on this slide is to continue providing workshops and one-on-one coaching that helps our business owners, entrepreneurs, and creatives adapt their business models to the COVID climate. And as you might be aware, we currently have been offering free, or rather no cost, virtual workshops and one-on-one coaching to local businesses in our community, and individuals who are interested in learning more about those opportunities should email us at atxrecovers@austintexas.gov. The next slide continues with our employee and business assistance opportunities, and it includes opportunities such as creating an Austin tool lending library. This would allow individuals to access tutorials and borrow equipment at no cost. This is one that's both related to COVID, but also could have long-term resiliency opportunities by empowering residents and communities to be able to grow their own food or learn new skills that they can continue to utilize even after COVID goes away. The next one on this list is to develop a local artist registry to foster more opportunities for Austin creatives to get hired for job opportunities. And this is something that our music and entertainment division, as well as our other EDD divisions, are currently working on. And then the last one on this list is to enhance access to affordable and quality childcare. Throughout COVID, we've been really proud of ourselves and that we've been able to work really closely with United Way and other community partners to support and sustain access to high quality and affordable childcare. Childcare is key to economic development and economic recovery. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to enhance access to both affordable and quality childcare, especially for families and households who currently don't have access to an affordable and high quality childcare center close to where they live or close to where they work. The next slide continues with additional employee and business assistance opportunities, and it includes facilitating stronger mentorship opportunities for our business owners. This is particularly important to a lot of our local small business owners who are seeking out mentorship opportunities with larger or more established business owners and entrepreneurs in Austin. The next one is facilitating the creation of business cooperatives. Actually, last week, the Economic Development Department disseminated a press release about a new business cooperative program that we're offering at no cost to anyone who's interested. And so you could visit austintexas.gov/EDD for more information on that program. So this is an opportunity that we've already started to implement in some ways. And then the third one on this list is to support existing advocacy efforts and the development of creative coalitions. And what these creative coalitions do is they empower our creative sector professionals to cross-promote their work as well as to collaborate on common issues of importance. And so in short, this is a way for us to continue to invest and support our vital creative ecosystem. The next slide continues with some additional employee assistance opportunities, and I promise these are the last ones for this category. And these include offering workforce development scholarships to unemployed or underemployed individuals who commit to working locally in their trained field or sector. And so we recognize that there might be some individuals who might not be interested in the workforce development opportunities that we provide or that maybe we provide in partnership with a nonprofit. And so we want to empower people to make decisions and to pursue careers that are both meaningful to them and that are also in demand in our local economy. The next one on this list is to provide our households with tools and resources to grow their own food. This is not in substitution of trying to attract grocers to communities that are currently food deserts, but this is to make sure that we are providing our households with the tools and the resources to be able to grow their own food and sustain themselves. And then the last one on this list is continuing to foster collaboration between Austin-based businesses to share goods and services. What this might look like, as an example, would be fostering convening a space where, let's say, a local dry cleaner and a local accountant shop are able to meet, and then they decide, hey, I'll do your dry cleaning once a month if you help me with my accounting and my bookkeeping and my taxes. And so this was an opportunity that was actually identified specifically by small business owners in our community. So we want to thank those small business owners for sharing their input on this one. The next portion of the presentation, if we go to the next slide, this deals with the financial support opportunities that were identified through our stakeholder engagements, and these include providing additional financial assistance to individuals, households, employees, businesses, and our nonprofit organizations. So we remember to include our nonprofit organizations in the list. Incentivizing adaptations to produce innovations and improvements to our commercial sites, which benefit employees as well as customers. Continuing our dedicated relief and recovery funding for our vital live music venue industry, as well as our musicians and our creatives. And temporarily reducing or waiving certain city permits or fees for businesses that are reopening safely. This one has a $ next to it because we do recognize that if we reduce or waive permits or fees, that will have an impact to departments' budgets. And so we do want to make sure that we're leveraging funds to make our city and our departments whole as we work to reduce barriers that might hinder some businesses from being able to reopen at all or reopen safely. The next slide focuses on our government procurement opportunities. So this includes entering into a City of Austin master supplier agreement for COVID-19 rapid testing, being a little bit more intentional about how we increase the amount of city procurement to small and local businesses. And I do want to thank the city manager who invited our department a few months ago to speak with other directors about ways that we can collectively increase the amount of city procurement going to small and local businesses. So thank you, Mr. City Manager, for being really forward thinking in that regard. And also to procure food from our local restaurants and our businesses to feed food insecure households, rather than relying on contracts with larger food providers such as the Cisco's of the world. The next slide focuses on mental health, mental wellness, and health opportunities that were identified through our 125 stakeholder engagements. These include continuing to provide enhanced mental wellness resources for Austin. As you may recall, we partnered and launched a mental wellness support line towards the end of last year. And then Integral Care was also providing enhanced mental wellness services. And both of those services were very highly utilized. And so we want to continue to make sure that we're supporting people's mental wellness as well as addressing their financial needs. In that same vein, we want to continue to provide housing and meals to our COVID-19 patients experiencing homelessness. And we want to continue to offer safety trainings and safety guidance to our business owners and our creative professionals so they can reopen safely. And one idea that came out of that was also potentially creating a safe reopening certification program, which would essentially highlight businesses that have committed to going above and beyond whatever the state mandates are and really putting the health and safety of their employees, of their customers, and of our community first. The next slide covers a few additional health and mental wellness opportunities, and it includes continuing to promote our existing health regulation requirements in combination with masking and social distancing as an initiative that consumers can easily recognize, and continuing to research and invest in innovative technologies such as automated contact tracing. The next slide deals with our last thematic area, so I promise you we're almost at the end. And so the next slide should be our public infrastructure opportunity slide. So I'll wait for the driver to catch up. There we go. So the public infrastructure opportunities include collaborating with government agencies and community partners to close the digital divide. We all know that access to internet and access to high quality internet was particularly important last year, and that importance will not go away even when people return to offices and students return to schools. So we want to continue our collaboration with our fellow government agencies and our community groups to close the digital divide in Austin. We also identified opportunities to continue permitting parking spaces and other outdoor spaces for other usage. There was a lot of interest in the Shop the Block program. And so our business community and some of our non-business residents even asked if we can consider continuing to permit those spaces for other usages. There was an opportunity that really centered around expediting affordable housing development, opportunities that focused on expediting sidewalk and bike route development, which will enhance equitable access to goods and services, as well as align with the city's Vision Zero priorities of reducing fatal and serious injury crashes on our roadways, and expediting temporary rezoning to activate underutilized spaces was an additional opportunity that was identified. This next slide includes the last of the 45 opportunities, and these are the last ones for public infrastructure, and they include allowing flexible timing restrictions for things like marathons and outdoor events, leveraging public works and transportation projects to offer short-term employment and economic security to Austinites, permanently extending and expanding the Healthy Streets program, which provides safe options for people to use low traffic areas for activities. And last but certainly not least, continuing to find ways to repurpose our city properties to offer short-term benefits for local business owners and creatives. I have two more slides before I hand it back over to Director Bersinio. The next slide speaks to our strategic anchors. You know, we talked a lot about opportunities. We didn't talk as much in this presentation about implementing all of these opportunities. But as we transition from the community conversations to identify opportunities and into the community work of implementing said opportunities, the anchors, there are certain anchors in which our work is grounded. And these are the same anchors from SD 23, which include leading with equity, affordability, innovation, sustainability, and resiliency, proactive protection, and community trust and relationships. Next slide, please. This last slide is just in terms of our next steps. Where do we go from here? We've had a year of conversations and virtual dialogue with community members from all backgrounds and all corners of the city. And those conversations are not over. We recognize that the road ahead remains uncertain. We are kind of building the plan as we're flying it, so to say, and we're using our best and most innovative thinking to guide our steps as we move forward. But we know that the road ahead is unprecedented. And so we invite the community to visit our Speak Up Austin page, as well as atxrecovers.com, to read the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Framework in more detail. There are also tools on the Speak Up Austin page where residents and our community members can provide feedback to Director Bersinio or myself or other members of our strike team. And we want to have ongoing dialogue with community. We'll also be providing ongoing updates through the Speak Up Austin page regarding Austin's local economy. We want to make sure that our community is aware of what unemployment and employment is looking like, who's still unemployed and who's getting employed, what sectors are rebounding and what sectors are continuing to struggle. Because we know that, number one, recovery is not going to mean the same thing for everybody. And we have to be really intentional about helping our most marginalized and historically underserved communities rebound. And number two, we know that just getting back to where we were in February 2020 is not good enough, because even in February 2020, we had members of our community who were struggling. And so the ongoing updates is our way of being very transparent and providing our community with the information that folks need to help us all work together to ensuring everybody recovers from COVID-19. The last but not least is beginning next month, we're going to start convening interdepartmental teams. These are teams that will take a deeper dive into each of the opportunities I explained today, as well as the feedback that we hope to receive from our community in the coming days and weeks ahead, and begin identifying opportunities that are ripe for implementation and can be implemented pretty swiftly. Identifying opportunities that might no longer be relevant because the conditions have changed, and identifying new opportunities based on ongoing conversation with our residents, with our neighboring jurisdictions, and then of course with all of you, Mayor and Council. And so with that, I know I said a lot and I tried to say it all quickly, but I'll hand it back off to either Director Bersenio or City Manager Spencer Cronk. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. And I'll see if Director Bersenio, you want to quickly, or we were going to open this up for questions first before we pivot into the next presentation. Thank you for the reminder. So with that, did you want to conclude, Director Bersenio, before we open it up for questions?
I don't think I have anything to add. We're happy to answer questions.
I guess I have more of a global question, and I don't know whether the question should come now or at the end of the next presentation. Obviously, this represents a lot of work, and in terms of identifying for us kind of a focused way of looking at just the breadth of needs and challenges and opportunities as exist in the city. This is a really important document, and I see this document as having an application for us in lots of different places and in lots of different ways. You know, as we re-engage in a strategic planning effort to see if we're still prioritizing the right things, and in terms of actions that individual council members may want to approve, or work that committees may want to work on. This is a lot of work and a lot being done. My sense in reading it is I only wish that we could deal with all of these at the same time and at once. But the breadth there is so great as to make it so that that's not realistically going to be possible if we're trying to do more than just touch things, but actually drive them to measures. So I'm going to hold off on my comments and then hold off introducing the resolution 111, which I think really goes to next steps, immediate next steps with respect to how we approach the spending of these dollars and other dollars that might become available to us. But I did want to, before we passed, to recognize, I think, the value of this work. Anything else, colleagues, before we go on to the American Rescue Plan? Manager, Kathy?
Just a quick one. One of the things that captured two questions. I was looking for this presentation. I feel as if we may have received it, or perhaps we haven't. We did receive it this morning. Is that one of the two presentations? Okay, I just need to find it in my inbox again. Thank you. Mr. Gray, I had a quick question for you about one of the items that you mentioned, because I know my staff and I have spoken about it with EDD staff a few times during this last year. I'm really glad to see one of the ideas that I put forward to utilize our local restaurants to help with what I think you're describing as the EAT initiative for meals and for other food for individuals experiencing homelessness. And I wondered if you had a thought about why. I know that has come up a couple times, and my staff has talked to public health and has talked to EDD, and I know there were some conversations going on. Can you help us understand what some of the challenges have been in moving forward in that direction, and how you would surmount those in the proposal that you've brought forward?
I was not directly involved in those conversations around the EAT initiative. I might have to defer to Director Bersenio or to another colleague, because I want to make sure you get an accurate answer to that question. So Director Bersenio, do you mind if let me pass it off to you?
Sure. Councilmember, we worked closely with the health department on that initiative. I would think that as of a lot of our lessons learned from this past year, I think moving forward, making it more of an organized effort in that regard, but we agree with you in that it's been an important connection of our local restaurants to our schools, and a great opportunity for our local restaurants to continue to to stay afloat in this trying time. So I think if the biggest challenge that's coming to mind, and I'm going to ask Sylnovia, she's on our call as well, to jump in if I'm overlooking something. But I think the biggest challenge is really to have that concerted effort in a more organized fashion as we continue forward.
Well, just to kind of backtrack, we had talked, I think, including at some work sessions with Director Hayden Howard on the dais, we had asked, could that same model be applied to the EAT initiative so that the meals that are being prepared for individuals experiencing homelessness and some of the food that utilized local restaurants in the same way that your framework now details. And that was quite a while ago. And I know there was, when we followed up, we would receive the response that you were looking into it, you being the city. I mean, it was a couple different departments, and I think that may be one of the challenges, right? These were conversations with public health and with EDD, but it seemed to me that idea had come up multiple times, and that it was being explored to shift to using that same kind of model for the caregiver meals to use with our own food distribution services that the city of Austin was doing. And so I'm wondering why that didn't move forward, and again, what the challenges were that didn't allow it to move forward, and how we're going to surmount them in the proposal you're bringing forward.
Yep, Councilman, I don't know enough about maybe the challenges that occurred before. I do know that as part of, there are a lot of things that city departments and staff were asked to do last year we all made a really good, honest effort to do those things. And last year we were also really learning, right, how to respond to COVID, what parts of our city system were flexible, and where can we be innovative and creative. And there are a lot more things that we know now that, quite frankly, we did not know last year. And there's new knowledge that we have now that we didn't have last year. As part of the where do we go from here with these recommendations, part of that is having more conversations between EDD staff, our city's food manager, APH staff, and our community partners to say, hey, we recognize that this is a need. This, quite frankly, is something that we're doing for a while. Maybe it's been piloted by APH. I'm not totally sure. But how do we get this particular idea off of the paper and into implementation? And if there are issues that exist, whether it's maybe a health regulation or a policy thing, or maybe it was a funding thing, then where are the opportunities for us to bring the resources and the support that we need in order to move past those hurdles and get the program going? So again, I wasn't directly involved in the EAT initiatives and those conversations. But I do know from some of the other places and spaces that I have been privileged enough to serve in, there was just a lot of things that we didn't know last year that we do have so much more information and a better understanding this year. And it just came with us trying to rebound from the sucker punch to the face of COVID, and now being able to take a little bit more of a proactive stance around planning and rolling out projects and programs. And Director Bersenio, I hope I didn't overstep or say anything wrong. So please let me know if I am kind of off a little bit. But I do know as part of our implementation, that is what we're looking at, is capturing the lessons that we learned from 2020 and really using those to empower us to do even more programming for the community moving forward in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. And I get what you're saying. I understand there was a lot of really tremendous work that had to be done right away, and you had to react to the situation. So all that makes, that seems very reasonable. I think that it is, I'm real interested in that program, and I think we probably also need to talk. You may have hit on some of it, the health I don't know if the way in which it's being distributed means it can't be meals, and it has to be, some of it has to be non-perishables, and maybe that can or can't come from our local supply. I don't know, but I am really interested in kind of figuring out, just tracking it down, not to say, gosh, it should have happened earlier, but just tracking it down to try to figure out, what were those impediments and how do we get it moving forward. So thanks for those thoughts, and we'll follow up too with some of the other parties who I know were in that conversation.
Sure, our pleasure.
Allison.
Thank you. This is as good a time as any to really pause and just, thank our staff throughout the city who stepped out during this last year and really innovated and got up and running all sorts of programs that we had no idea we would need, and did it in a super fast time frame, and rose to the occasion to pivot and to innovate, and just want to thank you all for all of that work. Just sort of seeing this now without a chance to really fully digest it, I don't know that I fully understand kind of where this takes us from here. It sounded like we were going to be receiving a memo, and probably makes sense for me to read that and reflect on it. Understand there's a this is well organized into these different buckets, but at the same time the ideas are of widely varying magnitudes of resources and other pieces, which just reflects the variation of the many challenges that we face. But I'm not, like, I see these all as interesting ideas. I'm not sure, if we're being asked to adopt this, if we're being like there's procedural questions that I have, that I would welcome further elaboration on if that's not in the memo, so that I can understand what this represents beyond kind of a snapshot of the ideas and the thinking where we're at this point in terms of what we're being asked.
Council member, we have not supplied a memo on this subject matter just yet. We do have quite a bit of documents available on the Speak Up Austin page, but I'm happy to summarize that and provide that in a memo to Mayor and Council, including next steps, so you have a clear idea of what's moving forward. I also would like to add, I don't think we said it in our presentation, but this is a snapshot. We have a document that goes into details in every one of these opportunities. So that will be a useful resource for our council as well.
Yeah, what I'm struggling with is we have a lot of different pieces, and is this like a bucket of things that you're saying, we want to do all these things and we want your blessing on council, or are these like, this is a menu of things, and then over the course of the next 6 months we're going to be deciding which of these we do, and if we don't want to prioritize one thing but we want to prioritize another, we think we should be putting more money in one bucket, like what? And maybe you're not ready for that process, and maybe this is a first step, but I'm not fully understanding kind of that piece of, and maybe you haven't presented that yet, and that's why I'm not understanding it. But at one point I would appreciate that clarification.
So we do see this as a guiding document. We see when we started down the path of looking at economic recovery a year ago, honestly, none of us thought we would be here a year later. But we initially started off with, what is our plan? What is our recovery framework looking like? We have been able to build upon that throughout the year as we executed relief programs, as we heard feedback from various stakeholders and community members. So we would like to use this as a plan that guides us in terms of any additional dollars that are provided, or as we could look at solutions that don't require additional resources. In the immediate, you'll see as we roll into this next presentation, we have tied what we're proposing as the spending plan for the federal funds that we have just recently been allocated, to use the principles in this plan to identify how do we prioritize those dollars. So we see that as a continuing effort of having this document provide some guidance in how we prioritize relief and resources to our community.
When you say the principles in here, I mean, I see the buckets and I see the ideas, but I'm not sure that I see the principles that are beyond what's in our strategic plan. So what are you referring to when you talk about principles? And again, I just got this, and this may all be totally self-evident once I sit with it. But that's what I would like to understand.
I'm having a cat day today. I'm sorry. We have a cat fight going on now. So maybe principles was the wrong word. We identify them as opportunities in the plan. So when we're looking at those opportunities that fall into the buckets that you're talking about, that's where I see our guidance coming as we're moving forward with a spending plan for any dollars that we identify for recovery.
Okay, I'm gonna sit with this and listen to the next presentation and the 111 conversation too. Thank you.
Anything else before we get there? And
Yes, and I want to,
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to be moving, so I'm going to lose connection here. Why don't you take over the chair? I'm going to try to get back in by phone.
Did you have a queue and going?
I think he called on me.
And then I think the goal is
Okay.
to get to the American Rescue Plan presentation
Got
and
it.
discussion of that with 111.
Thank you.
Okay, just so we can move along quickly, I do want to echo what my colleagues have said. Really appreciate the amount of work that went into bringing this forward and the thoughtfulness. And I know you engaged with a lot of different groups and departments. So my questions are simply, I share the questions that Councilmember Alter raised, and I'll be looking. The second question is related to how this initiatives or efforts, how this relates to the results that we're trying to get. Do we have an analysis of the problem, so to speak, that we're trying to address? And do we have an analysis of how these efforts are going to get results for us? In other words, we have a goal and we have a fairly highly stated goal, which is good, a high level statement of goal. But how do we know that this set of initiatives are going to get us there? Is there an analysis that was done or that is maybe coming that we can see, well, if we do, 5 of these 10, we're going to get this kind of results? Or anyway, that's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to connect these initiatives to the results we're trying to achieve in some kind of objective fashion, related to an analysis of, from a financial perspective or a number of jobs perspective or a number of people help perspective, whatever the measures are. Because I think that we need something like that in order to make any decisions about priorities.
Councilmember, I think, at least on my end, your screen froze momentarily, so I was unable to hear your first question. For your second question, though, the framework, the complete framework document itself does include a chapter that speaks to performance indicators that we will be monitoring and tracking over time. And it includes everything from indicators that you're probably really familiar with already, such as unemployment rate and housing market, all the way down to indicators such as self-sufficiency index. Do Austin households and families have 3 months worth of savings in a bank account that's not a predatory account? And who are those families, disaggregated by race and zip code and other key data? We have not done the specific type of analysis that I think you're asking for, which is, if we do these 5s, how much does that move the needle on any one indicators? And I'm not totally sure how we would do that type of regression analysis, but we have some people in EDD who I know who probably know more than I do. My colleague Casey Smith is probably somewhere laughing because she probably knows how to do it. But we are committed to making sure that, as any one of these opportunities gets implemented, that they are driving us towards demonstrating some realistic outcomes tied to the indicators that are included in the recovery document. And then I mentioned during the presentation really quickly that every quarter, and we might do it bi-monthly depending on how much data we're able to get and how quick we're able to get the data, but at least quarterly doing an economic update via the Speak Up Austin page. And so that update is really meant to give the council and the public a sense of how well our city is doing in terms of the indicators, as well as, the programs that we're implementing, whether or not we consider they're having an impact in some of these areas. But I do apologize. I missed the first question that you asked. So if you don't mind restating it.
It was really all just one question. And so what I'm hearing you say is that there are indicators to measure the output, so to speak, and or outcomes for particular initiatives. But my question is, have we set a goal to reach for each initiative? And how does that goal relate to what we're trying to? That's the part I'm not sure if I heard you saying that we had.
Understood. So the short answer is no. For each opportunity, we have not established like a clear goal. Something like 50% of Austin businesses enroll in a city class within the last 6 months. There are some indicators that have very clear goals, such as the opportunity around launching a live music portal. So part of the goal there is, number one, can we get it launched? And then there's some additional goals that are tied to specific EDD division outcomes, such as equity. We want to make sure that if there are creatives who are using a live music portal or who are using an artist registry, that those creatives really reflect the diversity and the beauty and the richness of our local creative economy. And then some of these goals will kind of morph over time. Part of the reason why we didn't want to set them in stone today is because the road ahead is still somewhat uncertain. And so we want to make sure that we are being adaptive in our approach to these opportunities so that we're able to best respond to the real needs of the community. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I think I'm understanding. I would just ask you all to consider taking the next step, which is setting those goals. In other words, if we don't know what we're trying to achieve, then we may know that we produced 10 widgets, but we don't know if we needed 10, to get what our community needs. So I'm hopeful. So I get it, and it's great that we're able to measure and that we have targets for the individual initiatives. But that doesn't help me decide which of the initiatives to use because I don't know how they contribute to what we're trying to achieve. So I would. Is that something that you all can do, or can you all consider that and just let me know?
Councilmember, we're happy to evaluate it in that sense. I would add that a lot of what we're talking about in the recovery framework rolls into the goals that we establish as a department for economic development. So I do think that that's a good starting point, and we can continue that discussion when we look at economic recovery. When we're talking about the dashboards, the presentations we'll be doing quarterly that David mentioned, I would add to that this whole discussion, all of this will be with transparency. So we have seen that in the past year of our dashboards that dashboard each one of the relief programs. We want to continue as we're having this data conversation to make sure that we're being transparent so that everyone can see the work that's being done in real time or as close to real time as possible. But happy to take a look at establishing goals and how can we make that data more meaningful for you as a council and for us as administrators as we're moving forward.
Okay, well then I will let others ask questions, but bottom line is, if I really want us to understand what we're trying to work towards. And I think that's necessary to really know whether we're being successful.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, anybody else have any questions before we move on to the next briefing? Councilmember Fuentes.
Yeah, just a comment, and I really appreciate the robust community engagement that you've laid out here for these dollars. I would just suggest that I don't know if I missed this part, but if there is an advisory council that you will be updating or including in the engagement process, if we can be intentional and deliberate about ensuring that we have various and diverse stakeholders as part of that council who represent different perspectives of the everyday Austinite. Really looking past, not just our chambers of commerce, but other individuals, nonprofits, just having a holistic perspective to provide feedback. And I really like giving the quarterly updates. I think that will go a long way. So just wanted to emphasize that suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember, we did include quite a robust group of individuals, and we're happy to share that information with your office. We not only had our focus groups that we were very cognizant about making sure that we had all perspectives at the table, but we also met one-on-one with a series of nonprofits, of entities to make sure that this work reflects a diverse perspective of our community.
Councilmember
We'll
Pratt,
definitely continue to do so.
if I can quickly build off of that, we literally went through the virtual phone book and intentionally sought out people who we know normally do not engage in city processes and probably don't have any relationship with City Hall, because those are the voices that we really wanted to hear from. We knew that it was important to hear from our everyday people, in addition to our close nonprofit partners and our chamber partners. I would also be remiss if I didn't say that the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Framework document is completely translated into Spanish, as well as we have an abbreviated version of the document, which is also completely translated into Spanish. And we're happy to work with our community partners to translate the document into other languages as needed. Typically, we translate all of our information to about 5 or 6 languages. In the interest of time, we were only able to get this one into Spanish, but we're also happy to provide it to other languages as needed.
Thank you all very much. We really appreciate the presentation and for answering all our questions. If there are no other questions,